All right, guys. Dane Volselka here with Volselka Fishing, and I wanted to review a couple more things about my experience on Mille Lacs that I think are some pretty cool little golden nuggets that have to do with how I caught the fish and what I learned throughout my day on Mille Lacs while fish were still pre-spawn, spawning, and post-spawn. Middle of the day, I had a lull. And I didn't really understand why at the time, but fishing picked up in the afternoon, and I learned something later in the day referring back to my success in the morning, and it made a lot of sense, and when I could repeat it, it made a ton of sense. So in the morning, I was catching smallmouth on a white Tech Easy Shiner, 4-inch Easy Shiner, like this guy here. Now I was throwing them on 1/8 ounce ball heads, and some of them are dipped, powder coated, custom painted by myself, just heating up the head and dipping them. But the biggest thing was I was casting over points and little spawning flats and trying to catch fish that were roaming on and off the flat. And I could catch them if I was casting at a distance, and I could stumble into a bite every, let's say, 10 minutes. And it was a decent fish. I lost a couple of really big ones right away in the morning. And it was sunny later on in the day, but cloudy in the morning. So I was trying to figure out how these fish were moving and how they were pulling off the lip during the cloudy morning, and then it was sunny throughout the day. But then when the low light period came back in the afternoon, they were kind of moving and staging in areas that I thought were similar to my morning bite. I was fishing next to Noah Schultz in my Vexus, and he was in his Skeeter, and he wanted to try the hair rod. So I let him use my hair rod blank, and there was one particular moment where he spot locked down, or he raptored down, and he got onto a little pot of fish, and he caught like 4 in 4 casts, and I couldn't repeat that. I couldn't find him. I could see him on ATarget every now and then, and moments after he had caught those fish and we kind of re-met up and exchanged words, I had pulled up onto a corner of this little flat, if you will, this hump, and I could move up onto a pot of fish, and I got excited because I could see them on my forward facing, and when I got up close, they dispersed, right? I later learned in the evening, after doing some film stuff with Champions Tour, which thank you to everybody with the Champions Tour. Filming was an awesome experience, and we got a lot of great content. So side note, thank you for all of that and all that you guys do. But after filming through the day and then fun fishing in the evening, I realized that I could catch these fish doing kind of what Mr. Schultz was doing, but I didn't understand how he did it. And I couldn't catch him as good as he was on the same flat. I'd pluck 1 or 2 here and there, and he'd get onto a pod and he would just murder them on my hair rod. I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. There's something that he's doing that makes sense to him that I'm not cluing in on. And I like to learn the hard way, so I just kind of kept to myself and was like, all right. So in the evening, I went out and I was catching fish. And I was, all of a sudden, I got bit going across the flat, fishing the edge, looking for pre- and post-spawn fish. And I was catching them again on these Tech baits. Now, this 4-inch Easy Shiner, you know, whether I was throwing like a Alewife color or this... I was throwing the electric shad and a bunch of different variations. I noticed that once I saw a fish, like I had mentioned in this previous video, I could cast out in front of them. But what I didn't explain was how that came to be. When I was throwing this Easy Shiner on my 7'6" custom spinning rod, in the morning, I didn't set the hook hard enough, so I lost a couple at the boat. This rod is a little bit stiffer than my hair rod, which I normally would throw something like this on my hair rod, and I could pick off a few, and when you button them up on the hair rod, it's pretty forgiving. Like once you stab them, you're good. With this stiffer rod, I realized I could really give them the beans, but then I had to peel on the reel pretty quick. I had to keep that line fairly tight and really keep the line from bowing, or I had to make sure that that rod was all the way to the backbone for my first 15 cranks of the rod, and then I could play with my drag a little bit because it doesn't have as much of a forgiving taper to the blank. But that was after I could get bit, right? So I noticed where on my 360 I could find shallow, like 4 to 6 foot consistent rock where there was a little lip or a transition or a highway of sand splitting rock flats apart, or where there was deep water adjacent to some contours that they would move up and spawn on. I could see these fish, and what Noah had as an advantage was he could talon or raptor down, right? And he could turn his active target or his forward facing, whatever he's using, away from the fish, and he could sit there and consistently cast on them, right? Well, I was finding the fish, and I would just like hone in on the group and try and chase them apart, and I was dispersing the group of fish, and I was not catching as many, or I would just scare them off the edge of the flat because A, it's shallow, B, I'm pinging them super hard and being way too aggressive, and I got excited. Well, later in the day, when I would find them, I could spot lock. Typically I was downwind. The wind was blowing from the east and blowing across some of these flats, and they'd be on the upwind side, and I could find them looking to my left or to my right, and I could spot lock where my active target wasn't pinging the fish, and I could see what direction they were swimming, and I could throw my bait out in front of them, and I could catch a couple doing that. Or I didn't disperse the little wolf pack as bad, so then I could consistently catch them. That was like that was the deal for me. That's how I caught them. I was throwing that freaking little swim bait, right? This little guy on light line, 8-pound to 10-pound braid to 8 to 10-pound fluorocarbon, depending on what rod I was using. On my hair rod, I limbered up a little bit, and on my 7.6 medium light SJ 902 model that I discussed earlier, I could put on 10-pound and just horse them a little bit more at first, and that 10-pound braid to 10-pound fluorocarbon leader allows me to cast really far. On a 3000 size Ravel here from Shimano, I could cast it really far off that larger spool face, and that was a ticket for me. And I caught some big fish and was super excited at the end of the day, and it all came together, and I could refer back to when Noah was catching them on the hair rod, grouped up, cloudy morning. They were moved off the edge and swimming around. Some of them were around Big Rock, but I mean, we're fishing fairly shallow water and not fishing bedfish. And I could narrow that down and really make it work for my style of fishing. And because I don't have raptors, it was a spot lock deal where I could fish out of 45 and cast out in front of them. And that's something that I just wanted to share because that's such a nugget. In my mind, it was a learning experience that really clued me into how I'm going to use my electronics moving forward and how I can learn from other people on the water live time, especially when I'm surrounded by such amazing anglers on a weekday. You want to take advantage of those times where you get to go up and fish such an amazing fishery, and then capitalize your time at the end of the day putting things together. And I had an awesome time up there. So thank you guys for tuning in. It was a super cool learning experience. Little tidbit on the baits and the line and the reels and the rods that I'm using. Hopefully you guys can throw that into your tackle box and get out there and stab some smallmouth. Till next time, ladies and gentlemen, Dane Vaselka with Vaselka Fishing. We'll see you on the water, baby. Oh my God! Dude, it's so big!
Come here. Come here.